Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström, the author of several sewing books, and I also make sewing patterns and lots of helpful sewing content under the brand name The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. I am a freelance pattern maker, and I also create my own PDF pattern under the name Hazelhen Patterns.
And in today's episode, we're going to do a follow-up that we started to record, a little bit of a series, right, Malena, where we go through all the steps when it comes to sewing pants or sewing trousers, which is definitely a topic that we realized that took several episodes because there's so many details. And also several people have commented that trousers is definitely a tricky thing, and especially zippers, I think, seems to scare a lot of people. Relatable.
Yeah, and I mean, we know the irony of that we were supposed to talk about zippers and waistband last episode, but we got sidetracked and talked about something else. So even just talking and apparently recording an episode about zippers is a little bit like, oh, no, let's do something else. Let's do something more fun. So we do recognize and we acknowledge if you think that zippers can be a little bit like daunting and you don't want to really get into it. Like, we feel ya, we hear ya. Yes, we agree.
Yeah, it is tricky, and you won't get it right the first time. And the good thing about this episode, at least for me personally, was that I became inspired to sew a pair of trousers during the conversation. If you listen to the last episode that we did on trousers, I think it was episode number 32, I talked about that I was really inspired by a pair of jeans from a French brand, Jean Bateau, I think I pronounce it decently, and which is a really interesting, like, dressier jeans pattern. So it's a mix of trousers and jeans. And if you're watching the YouTube version of this video, I'm going to do a bit of a screen share now. And if you can also go over to our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, and we're going to post some pictures as well. So I'm just going to show here the jeans that I was talking about. So here you can see my inspiration here. Yeah. So what I really like about this is that it has some jeans details like the belt loops, but it has, instead of curved pocket, it has slanted pocket. And let me see here if I can show. So you can see the slanted pocket on this image, and in the back it's beautiful because it has stitched darts. And I tried to explain this in the last episode, that it also has, like, I shouldn't say horizontal, but diagonal darts that goes to the back crotch seam, which I was really interesting detail. And I didn't do that on the placed
more, how to say, on the apex of your bum, like the widest point of your seat. But up there, I mean, then it's just, I think, decorational.
Yeah, it probably doesn't do anything for the shaping. Is that your opinion, right? It doesn't really...
I think so. I mean, a little bit the waistband, like if you have a really sway back, then that kind of detail might be good. But I think it's mostly the most purpose is decoration. Then it looks really nice, very nice detail. Yeah. So this is a PDF pattern.
No, this is unfortunately not a PDF pattern. It's high-end designer jeans that cost around 500 euros, I think, which is, I'm going to stop sharing now. It's you can find them at Net-a-Porter if you're so inclined and have the budget to spare. But of course, as we know how to do this stuff, Malena, right? We joked before we started recording this episode that we are the podcast that talks a lot about sewing, but we seldom talk about the stuff that we sew ourselves. And the reason for that is why?
Well, we don't sew so much these days.
No, because we're busy running a business, running businesses. Yeah. So that's a little bit of the irony. I think, is this a international saying, or is it just a Swedish saying that you say that the shoemaker's child never has any shoes? I think I butchered it a little bit, but that means basically that you don't really, even we can sew, but we seldom have time to sew stuff for ourselves. I mean, if we these days when we sew a lot of stuff, it's lots of samples, for developing new patterns and photo samples and stuff like that. So it doesn't really expand our wardrobe, even though we do know how to sew. But
yeah, and I just want to emphasize proof to that saying. I have a big window here in front of me, but the sun is coming right at me right now. So I need to have a curtain. Do I have a curtain? No, I have a bed sheet hang up on the, the curtain, where a curtain is supposed to be. I haven't sewn them yet, so I've just thrown on a bed sheet as a curtain at the moment. So yeah, that saying is 100% me.
I definitely feel that the listeners of this episode would definitely want to have a photo on Stitch and Tails Pod, I think, on Instagram of this incredibly interesting curtain solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same here. I mean, I just hemmed. I hem clothes for my daughters. They are also on the short side. So I had 2 dresses and a pair of pants that I got from one of my daughters when she was visiting in the summer. And last week I hemmed them and sent them to a package to her. So that took roughly 3 months. Oh, yeah.
No.
And it wasn't that. Yeah, but I did it. But anyways, now if you're watching the video version, I'm gonna hold up what I'm working on, because I thought it was a good thing to freshen up my own knowledge when it comes to sewing zippers and waistband and all the stuff like that. So keep in mind then, if you saw the picture of the jeans, the Jean Patou jeans, you can see here that I've sewn a similar version in dark denim with the slanted pockets and top stitching. I did skip the darts that went into the crotch seam, but I've done something similar here. If you can see, we're of course going to post a picture of this project as well. So I stitched down the darts here, which was a really nice detail. I never top stitched dart before, but I kind of like it. It adds some interesting in the back without using pockets. But in the last episode, we talked about, I think we ended up with the front pockets, and we kind of left there. So, and the next step, I would argue at least, is to insert the front zipper. Do you have any preference, Malena, for what type of zipper? Metal or coil or?
No.
Polyester, or nylon.
I saw so many samples these days. I think I sewed a pair of trousers 15 years ago when I was in school. But whatever you choose, good quality.
Yeah.
Because here it's going to be a lot of stress on the zipper, and you don't want something that breaks too easily, and after wearing, washing, you want them to be as durable as possible. So don't save on the zipper, go for a really good quality.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the YKK brand, which also you can often find in better ready to wear as well. I think
they are the dominant when it comes to zippers. They are almost market domination.
Yeah. So if you get those, and they're really nice as well. And I always buy YKK. Definitely, I'm a big fan, and I never actually. I mean, I've sewn so many jeans for myself, and the zipper has never, ever broken down. I mean, the fabric, of course, wears down. So, eventually, if you don't want to mend too much, the jeans are... Sometimes I wish that I was more, mindful about, I could actually reuse the zippers. And I'm going to start doing that because you can't see it, but I'm wearing a pair of jeans that I've sewn myself. And the fabric is just, have gone through the ties now. So it's... but the zipper is working. It's a YKK zipper. It works absolutely fantastic. I mean, there are lots of different methods. Again, it's hard to explain when we're doing a podcast, but I think I should talk a little bit my favorite assembly method for sewing zipper, because it is tricky. And the trick, in my opinion, is to sew it flat. And when I say sew it flat, I mean, normally when you sew a pair of trousers, you sew both the legs as separate entities, right? And then you join them together in the crotch seam. So you sew the crotch seam, the final step. But what I've found, especially if you are struggling with inserting zipper, is that it actually helps to insert the zipper on the flat, which means that you just stitch the two front pieces together, right side facing, and you stitch just up to where the zipper should be inserted. So you have like that, and then you insert the zipper and the zipper shield and zipper fly and things like that. I have on my blog where I show exactly this method, so I'm definitely going to link that. But you will of course be able to sew it, how shall I say, you can sew it afterwards as well, inserting it, but especially I find the top stitching, it's when we talked about, we often talk about, sew the steps so you get the most access, right? Because that helps, because if you can have the fabric pieces flat on your sewing table, it's much easier to do the top stitching. But if you have everything sewn together, it's going to be a bit more difficult to control everything in the sewing machine, because it's a little bit enclosed like that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of doing that. And of course that means that you have to fit or check the fit of the garment, because it's more difficult to fit that way, because if you end up realizing that the crotch was too big or need to be scooped out, you're going to have more problem because you already insert the zipper. So there are pros and cons with that method. I know it was a while ago, Malena, but do you remember?
I think I always done it the other method, that I sewed like more or less the trouser were more or less complete, and then like crotch seam, the total was sewn, and you fit it then, and then you add on the zipper and then the waistband. So it's another way of working, which also, I mean, you can do it that way, it's just a matter of preferences. But I would definitely, if I would sew trousers today, I would definitely go your way. So prototype sample first, just to check the fit and do any adjustments if needed, and so I would be able to do it in that way instead, because it sounds more easier to sew the zipper that way.
Yeah, I definitely, it is much easier. And I will say that since I applied this method, which I do on all my jeans, and now I also started to do it on dress trousers, I will say that it's faster and more accurate, and the stitching is way easier. And as I said, I showed this method on the blog, and I should also recommend the book, I think it's called Fit for Pants or something like that, by Parma Pletch. It's a book about fitting pants, but it also has really good instructions on different ways of inserting a zipper in the front. And when I'm talking now, I'm talking about the classic way of doing zippers, which means that I'm just going to show
And one good thing also to remember when you sew the zipper is you have a special presser foot for them. You don't use the regular presser foot. You have another presser foot that allows you to sew a lot closer. Like you move your needle to one side, and you will be able to sew so much closer without having that wide presser foot in the way. So that's also something good to remember, to change your presser foot and change the position of the needle to help out.
Yeah, because you do want to sew pretty close to the coils of the zipper, and I agree with you. It's much easier. And I think most sewing machine usually has this included, or at least it's always
like
easy to find. It's a great foot. So I'm going to hold up a pair of store-bought pants here, but when I talk about trouser zippers, I'm talking about like the whole. It can be, of course, a lot of different ways, but here is where you have the stitched top stitching on the front here. You have a facing on the inside where the zipper is, and then you also have a fly shield which protects the zipper. It's like a buffer between your skin and the zipper. Usually, I mean, sometimes it's not really an issue. I don't know, Malena, do you have an opinion if you need to use a fly shield, or you can skip it because it's easier?
Otherwise, the zipper is gonna be right next to your skin like your underwear, and can get caught in that, because usually you have metal zippers because they are more durable in that sense. So I think you always need to have a zipper shield.
Yeah, I very much agree. I very much, because I think it just looks nicer and more professional as well. And you can have fun with the shield as well. You can use contrasting fabric if you want, or maybe on the back side, because again, it's such a nice, like, it's very easy to sew. Again, I show this in my blog, but I'm going to talk a little bit now. It's going to be very abstract now because we're talking about, we're not talking about not showing. But what I do always is that I adapt the patterns. So sometimes when you get the pattern on one piece, you're supposed to do the extension, and the other piece is like an extended part, and then on the other part you can insert a shield. But what I do is that I actually cut the classical seam allowance on both the left and the right pattern. So I don't really do the extension. Instead, I actually add or a facing, because I've found recently, especially if you stitch a separate facing piece instead of just folding it back, it adds some stability. And I've seen in a lot of ready-to-wear that they do that. So because you have that seam there, you have more stability, and there's a less risk that the fabric will be like stretched out and everything like that. So it could be a good idea to actually stitch the facing separately rather than just use the extension and fold it back. Of course, again, it comes to preference, and always when you're doing the facing or the one that is that you fold back, I always interface that, and you can see here I'm holding up these ready-to-wear unique pants. There is always interfacing because you're going to top stitch that later on. So you do want some stability, especially if you're working with like softer fabrics. Maybe you don't need it when you're sewing denim, but I definitely recommend it that way. And so what I do if I do in dress pants is that I sew the crotch seam up to roughly where the zipper starts, and then I have everything else flat, and I actually attach the zipper by top stitching it. Like, this is going to be hard to explain, so we're going to post some pictures also, and then I insert on the other side and I attach it to the facing or the fly shield. I mean, so that's how I do it, and it's hard to give some really good tips, but you can also go over to my website, because I have pattern pieces for these particular pieces as well. And so I think the most important thing is just to find a method that you are comfortable with. I guess that's the best advice I can give you. And also, I think, do check ready-to-wear pants, because they usually have, since it's the garment industry, they need to figure out methods that are easy to reproduce and quick. So maybe you have an old sewing book and it feels like a very overwhelming and cumbersome experience. Perhaps you can actually check how the zippers are installed in a nice pair of ready-to-wear pants, and you will probably actually see that they have a few things figured out that maybe not all sewing books have, I would argue, actually.
Yeah, and a good thing to also check if you have a pattern that because sometimes if the fabric is stretched out when you wear it, that you actually see a little bit of the zipper, and that might be because the front rise. So I'm gonna. Do you know what I mean now? That the zipper is actually moved away like 0.5 centimeter from the actual. Explain what I mean.
Yeah, I mean it depends, because you are actually, depending on the method you're using, the zipper is actually slightly shifted in a way. So I guess it depends on the crotch seam, how that's shaped, right? Where you're going to be. I think I've actually stopped, as long as it doesn't gape, I don't really care the position, because I actually shifted a little bit. The most important thing is that, the front seam or the fold over is aligned with the crotch seam. I mean, this, sorry listeners, but this is so hard to explain.
No, but the reason why like the zipper is like moved 0.5 centimeter is that then you have that 0.5 centimeter
overlap.
It can gape a little bit, like it can open up a little bit without the zipper actually start to show. That's how they do it in all ready to wear garments.
So I'm holding it up here. You can see here what Malena is talking about. There's a overlap here. So the zipper, as you say, Malena, the zipper fold shouldn't be exactly where and I think I can show it also on the pants that I talked about here. You can see the same
piece
thing
is
here.
Gonna look a little bit funny, like it's not gonna have a nice smooth crotch seam. It's gonna be like half a centimeter all of a sudden, like extension. I would
say behind the other overlapping part where the facing is. So if I'm holding up the jeans here, you can see again that the fabric is folded, and then you overlap. So it's as you say, Malena, it's almost centimeters or a little bit less, and that's the secret, which. Again, I don't think all sewing patterns instructions have, or at least sewing books instructions. So that's a really, really good tip. And you just fold the seam allowance. It doesn't really matter because, the sum of all parts, you're still going to have the same measurements, because it doesn't really matter that the zipper, unless you want to have it exposed, it shouldn't really align with the crotch. It should be, as you say, Malena, shifted about 1 centimeter inside to protect it from the gaping. So that's a really good tip, very, very important tip. So those are the things, and I will say I've learned more about how to sew zippers by examining ready to wear than I've learned in any sewing books, because I'm going to be a little bit controversial now. I think I've seen a lot of really unhelpful instructions for how to insert a zipper into pants that requires really a lot of fiddling, which is absolutely unnecessary. And I think that's one of the reasons why myself and many others have been quite intimidated by inserting zippers, because it's very difficult to get it right if the instructions are too complicated, I think. And also, especially if it's the front of your body, so you want it to look right. Unless you get something wrong with the stitching and everything, it's very visible, especially if you're doing jeans. I mean, you have yellow top stitching that is like wonky and uneven. It's a little bit difficult to like accept, especially if you're a little bit obsessive about this stuff.
Yeah, it is a very visible area, so you definitely want to get it right. Do you have any? How do you sew your zippers? I mean, these are like old standard rules, like women's or men's or unisex, like which way things should be opening up, if it should be a right on top or the left on top. How do you do it?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I've actually realized that a lot of time I do default to the female in big quotation marks here, of course. I mean, there's a story behind this. I think it was traditionally, if you were dressed the way, if you had a dresser, a person that was dressing you, depending on how they were standing, they had different approaches. So I've noticed that, and it's the same with buttoning on a shirt as well, that it's definitely, you can get the different variations. Honestly, that's just because it kind of feels weird because you're so used to one direction. So I've noticed that if I like switch it around, then I always get a little bit confused because I'm like holding the wrong side when I'm going to pull up or down the zipper. So that's just a preference of mine. But you should definitely just do you, and there's no right or wrong here. It's just the interesting historical perspective that keeps sneaking in even today. Do you have any preference for that, Malena?
I prefer it. I think it is the unisex method. I mean, as the men's do it then, as it usually is on denims, because that's the only trousers that I have zippers on, basically. So it's then you pull it up with your right hand. To me, that just feels more natural. But I mean, it doesn't have any, like, so to say, function, or it's just a matter of what do you prefer, what is easier for you to, when you pull up or down the zipper. It doesn't have any, like, as you said, it's not wrong or right, it's just a matter of opinion.
Yeah. And so just do you, and I think also on the jeans I'm making, because I am so like so I've done the opposite. I haven't done the traditional, I've actually used the same, the opposite of what you like, Malena, because it's just because I'm so like my brain, and I also have problems. I'm one of those people that can't tell right from wrong, so don't even ask me on which side the zipper is on, because I have no idea, but it's on one side, and probably the opposite side of Malena's jeans.
As long as it's there, it's fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I should also say we're talking just about zippers here, and you can also of course do a button fly, especially if you're sewing denim, and also of course other pants. My only tip there is if you are sewing very fitted trousers, I definitely recommend that you use a zipper rather than buttons, because there is not the crotch is not kept together all the entire way. They're gaping obviously between each button. So if it's very like skin tight, you will probably risk having a bit more gaping, I think. So I would definitely, anything skinny or tight fitting, I would definitely use a zipper rather than a button fly, in my opinion.
So Johanna, have you edited the video course yet for the zipper part?
No. I've been busy sewing jeans. That's more fun.
I 100% understand that.
Yeah, but I should definitely say that if you are want to see exactly how I sew insert a pair of zippers in a pair of jeans, you can go over to my YouTube channel where I have a tutorial about this particular thing. So you're definitely going to get some good ideas, and you can also get my book Sewing Jeans as well, because I show it there as well. And you can use that exact same method actually on any type of dress pants, just that you don't use contrasting thread and all the stuff. But apart from that, it's pretty much the same method. Yeah, so I think if we have kept some listeners now talking about this, then once you've done the zipper, then it's time to sew the seams, right, Malena? Do you have any preference for seam allowance and stuff like that when it comes to side seams?
No, 1 centimeter, the regular, I would say. I mean, if you are a little bit unsure about the fit, then you can always have a little bit extra seam allowance in case you want to, the trouser became too tight, you have a little bit of extra room there to take it out. But I usually go always with 1 centimeter.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to get inclined to do it as 1 centimeter, because I think I'm a little bit old school in my head and still use 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 inches. And honestly, I did this on the jeans that I'm talking about now, and I think it's unnecessary wide. As you say, if you need to fit as you go, it's definitely to have good idea. But it's just a lot of extra unnecessary. You don't really need that. It's more difficult, more fabric to press aside. So yeah.
Yeah, and if you have a wider seam allowance and you fit it and it looks nice, I would cut away the extra, so you have 1 centimeter left. Yeah,
because I'm going to hold up here, because you can see here I used 1.5 centimeters, and I think it's a little unnecessarily wide actually on the pants. Because it's going to be fold up as well. And I think it would look nicer if it was 1 centimeters, which most in the ready-to-wear industry as well, it's usually 1 centimeters or 12 millimeters maybe. So it's just and do you, when we're sewing the side seam, Malena, would you join them together afterwards, or do you always press them apart? I mean, what's your thought on that, on the seam allowance?
Good question. I'm trying to think again, because it's a long time since I've sewed a pair of trousers, but what they do in the ready-to-wear garment, I think they split them, or no? Yeah,
they do, I think so. I just hold up the Uniqlo pants. They are pressed apart both on the inseam and the outer seam. And as you can see here, I'm holding up a pair of ready-to-wear pants. It's 1 centimeter seam allowance, clearly, as you say. Yeah. And
one good thing, could you check on the top part then, closer to the waistband where the pockets are they pressed both towards the back then? Because that's visual memory I have, that in the top it's always pressed towards the back, because otherwise it's going to be so many layers if you want to press the pockets and everything, the seam allowance towards the front. So there at the top it's pressed towards the back, but then just below the bottom it's split instead.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, you can see what Malena is referring to, because if you add front pockets, you will have so many layers. So if you try to press that part towards the front crotch, it's going to be extremely, extremely bulky and it won't lie flat. So what people do usually is that they they usually like press some back and then they just keep it open up here. I've used a different technique here. I think I can show you on the jeans as well here, where what I do with the jeans is that I here you can see, so at the pockets the seam is pressed backwards, and then I have opened it up here like this, so it's flat, because that's you get the best thing, and you don't really have to worry about it flipping back and forth. You can cut a little bit snippet here, you can stitch it open, so I think that's a really good way of doing it. I think it's almost impossible to press the upper seam allowance on the front pockets towards the front. It's going to look really weird because it's the opposite direction as well.
It wants to go. It's so many layers, so it's just want to go to the back. And you can stitch them down as well on the back. Don't they do that on denims?
Yeah, they do it. The stitches back. So you do like a top stitching that runs through the entire pocket piece that is inserted in the side seam, and that keeps it in place and towards the back. So I think, and I'm also a big fan of pressing the seam allowance apart when you're doing woven. You can just get a nicer, flatter look, and also you will avoid lots of bulk as well, because you press the seam allowance in opposite direction, so there are less layers to sew over. And I just think it looks really nice and classy, right? I think I can imagine that, cheaper assembly method, it's quicker to just sew the pieces and then serge over both layers like that. But I don't think it's cheap. I think it cheapens the look a little bit and adds unnecessary bulk. I mean, if you do a lot of good pressing, I think you will be able to keep the seam allowance apart. Which also brings to your favorite.
When you hem it, it's going to be a lot easier if you have pressed them apart, because then you distribute the thickness, because the seam allowance is not all in one place. And if you even fold them twice, I mean, it's going to be a lot of layers. So it's going to be easier if you have splitted the side seam then. Yeah.
So do that, and also press as you go, right, Malena? So when you sew the one seam, press before you start sewing the other webs, because the more access you have to everything, the better your result is going to be, right? So don't wait until you've sewn both the side seam and the inseam and the crotch seam to start pressing, right?
Yeah.
You need to.
It's just going to be a lot of it's going to be so much easier. And when you are sewn together the legs, use those smaller pressing board iron, like for sleeve pressing board, like those really like miniature, because it's going to be just so much easier to actually press them flat then. Yeah,
that's a very good tip as well, because it's just so difficult. And then you also risk of if you press the seam allowance with everything on double layer, you also risk getting pressing marks. So if you do what Malena says and use those sleeve iron board, you won't press against it, because it's very easy to get like not great marks of the seam allowance on the other side, because that's again is a telltale sign of a good pressing, that you don't have like very visible pressing marks on the right side if you do it correctly. So press as you go, and be careful with the heat, but not too high, not too low. And use a pressing cloth. I've definitely been better than that in recent years as well, just to protect the fabric, especially if you're dealing a lot of dressier pants. Usually fabric has some synthetic component as well, so it's always a good idea to be quite careful when you do the pressing and protect the fabric. You don't want to melt the fabric, and wool, you get shiny fabric, and I don't know if you can get rid of that, so you have to be really pretty careful.
So press from the wrong side and use a pressing cloth over it, so I think that will prevent it. But it's really difficult to get those pressing marks away. So it's a lot of things, and we say this because we've all done the mistakes, right? That's a good thing, because even though we don't sew much right now, well, we know a lot about sewing anyways. We remember our mistakes very well.
Yes, it's hard to forget. Anyways, now you're pretty much done with a lot of stuff. There is, of course, belt loops, and they can be done in lots of different ways. But usually the belt loops are inserted either you start by inserting them before you stitch the waistband, which I'm going to show on the jeans that I'm making, where the lower part of the belt loops, I've actually attached them before I attach the waistband. So I won't. I need to stitch it down here as well, but it just removes one step, and then I can top stitch just the upper layer after I've like sewn the waistband. So that's one way of doing it. You can top stitch the belt loops. You can do it hidden. That's definitely not a tutorial I've done for pants, but I personally really like when the belt loops aren't stitched like this, because they just an invisible seam. So it's a little bit tricky, but it looks really, really nice. Of course, when you're sewing jeans, you can top stitch it with 2 rows, or you can use a cover stitch machine and get it really nice. So that's just a good way, depending on what method you want to do. If you want to sew the waistband first, then you add the belt loops, but you can also insert them and make it looks more hidden and nice. And speaking about waistband, we talked a little bit about that, I think, in the first episode as well. We took the importance of picking the right type of waistband, because you mentioned the value, right, Malena, of sometimes using a curved waistband, right? And why is it sometimes better to use a curved waistband than a straight? And straight we mean like a rectangle, and a curved is likely shape, where it's a bit more narrow at the top than at the bottom, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a lot better fit if you have a curved waistband, because then if you ever have trouser when the waistband is like gaping, especially in the back, I mean, that's because the top part of the waistband is too long. And if you are curving it, well, then that length is shortened, basically. So it's just going to be a nicer fit if you have a curved waistband. The exception is if you have the waistband like exactly at your waist, then you get by with having it straight. Then that works as well. Or I mean, if you have a really loose fitted trouser, like more of a what do they say, boyfriend's fit or something more like that, then the fit is not. I mean, it also is workable to have a straight waistband, but no, I always prefer to have a curved waistband, because it is just going to do that a little shape. It does so much to the fit. Yeah. And the same with like we mentioned this before, also the yoke, that the yoke should be slightly shaped. So when you put the yoke back together with the back leg, there is basically a built-in dart there, and that is going to do wonders to the fit. So make sure always, if you have a yoke, that there is actually shape in it, so you get a really, really nice fit. Otherwise, the yoke doesn't have any purpose, it's just decoration. But if it has different shape, then it's like a dart built in there, so always check that.
Yeah, because you basically, if you construct your own jeans, you're basically like, if you have a basic pattern with a dart, and then the yoke is basically where you just close the dart. So as you can see, when you close in the dart, you get that nice curved, and you get that shaping. And you have to, I mean, most people aren't like straight in the back. I mean, we do have a curvature in the back, and I think having gaping is probably one of the most common thing, which is also why having darts in pants in the back is very, very helpful. So, and that's for jeans, for instance. So basically, the yoke eliminates the need for a dart, and you still get that nice shaping. And when it comes to waistband for sewing patterns, the curved ones, they're usually split. So you have at least it's sewn in the side seams, and oftentimes it also has a back seam, which I think it's sometimes good to have a seam in the mid back of your waistband, because that gives a little bit room to adjust. If you just have a little bit problem with the gaping in the back, which is more common than in front, you have a little bit room there to like narrow it down a little bit. So that could be a benefit of having a seam mid back of your waistband. But actually, which for the jeans that I'm sewing right now, I started with a pattern that had a back seam, and I thought, really good, I can do then fit as I go. But then I encountered a thing that I never thought about before, because I'm using quite a rigid, heavy denim, and of course you also have a belt loop at the the mid-crotch seam, and you also top stitch and you fold, you sew 2 layers when you're top stitching. So what happened was that because of the seam allowance in the mid back waistband, added so much bulk that the sewing machine had troubles to feed through all these layers, because you get 2 extra layers of fabric just because of that. So I actually skipped that pattern, and I did, and I also have instruction for this in my book Sewing Jeans. So what I did is that I did, and I'm holding up here a curved waistband. It's very rudimentary, but I trimmed it, I can assure you. So what I did is just that I cut a rectangle, and then I just slashed and closed at a couple of instances. So I got like a nice curve, and this is a pretty easy way and a common method, right, in pattern constructions, that you just, what is it called in English? We call it vim in Sweden, but I don't remember the word. When you overlap, you slash and overlap, so you create like a shaping.
The opposite of slash and spread, basically.
Yeah,
Slash and overlap.
Slash and overlap, that right. So then you can use this rectangle and just like open it up in about 5 spots or something like that, and just close, and then you just calculate, how much do you want the waistband to be at the top, and then you just spread that amount on at least 5 places. I think is a good way of getting the shaping, and so that's what I'm doing right now, actually. And because just as you say, the curved waistband, it just prevents so much of the gaping in the back, and I definitely have an issue with that. So I would definitely recommend that. Another great thing about actually using a waistband that is cut curved is that you get slight built-in stretch, because you are cutting some part of the waistband slightly on the bias. So that means that, especially if you're working with quite rigid fabric like denim, that doesn't even if it doesn't have lycra, it still has a little bit of stretch. I'm pulling here, you can see it just has a little bit, and that's a nice feature to have, because you don't want to get like how should I say, out of breath because of, we talked about that in another episode. You don't want to feel uncomfortable in your clothes, and having a very rigid waistband is definitely a triggering thing for me.
Yeah, and I also think just the same here as you mentioned with the zipper, that if you have a seam on the top of the waistband when you are sewn 2 curved waistbands together, that also gives it a little bit of stability at the top. I have that feeling when like I have a folded over waistband that it doesn't have any stability at the top because it is folded. I mean, they are stable. They are 2 layers of fabric, and usually also with fusing.
Interface, yeah.
But it's just that it gives a little bit more stability when you have the seam at the top. It just, to me, it feels more comfortable having it.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually, even sometimes I sew jeans with a rectangular waistband, and I actually do oftentimes do the extra effort of cutting it in 2 pieces and sew it together, just because of that stability. You don't need to, I mean, if you top stitch, you will probably get a lot of stability there as well. But I agree with you, Malena. Seams, they do take up more time, but they also have functions. So it can definitely be a valuable thing, actually, to add that upper seam, even if you are using a rectangular waistband. But my number 1 tip forever and ever is to always interface both the inner and the outer waistband, because that's such a game changer. And I've seen a lot of like older sewing instructions where they just tell you to interface maybe the inner, I think it's usually on wovens, the inner waistband. But you can have so much problems because the fabric will shift when you're top stitching and everything like that. So I'm a big fan of using a fairly lightweight or mid-lightweight fusible interfacing. Here it's just I think it's a little bit knitted, but it has a tiny amount of stretch, but it's just the perfect amount. So when you have double layer, you will have stability, but it's not like rigid. So it's just going to be so much easier, especially getting a waistband to look nice on the inside is tricky, but if you have fused both sides, it gives so much more control, in my opinion. So that's definitely also, again, like as Malena said, doing 2 pieces, also interface 2 pieces. Game changer, absolute game changer.
And do you leave all the seams not unoverlocked?
Yeah, unoverlocked, without any edge finishing. Yeah, no, I never. That's another good tip. I mean, unless the fabric is very prone to fraying in nicely woven, especially also if you're adding interfacing, you do not need to overcast the edges. It just adds more bulk and time, and also you waste thread. It's wasteful in a sense. What's your opinion on that, Malena? Do you overcast everything, or
no? I mean, since the seams are enclosed, like they are not gonna unravel, especially if you have fusing then as well. And I mean, on trousers, if the fabric is the kind of fabric that it easily unravels, you shouldn't sew a pair of trousers on them in the fabric then, because it is. I mean, the seams, there are going to be so much stress on the seams. I mean, when you sit down, the crotch seam, imagine if you have a fabric that is easily comes apart, they are going to burst in the seam, basically. So don't use that kind of fabric for trousers, unless they are like very loose-fitted palazzo pants with I don't know, gatherings at the waist. Then it might be workable. But yeah, no, sturdier fabric, it's fine without... overlocking the inside, and also it creates bulk. It adds bulks if you overlock all the seams. So there is a purpose. There is a purpose to leaving them unsewn, even though it feels a little bit like you are cheating. But there is a reason why. Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, it saves both time and money. I mean, good thread is also precious. So, and even if you're using a serger, you're still, you're going to waste completely unnecessary. Yeah. Very, very good point there. And then the one trick that I also have that I do share also in the tutorial, and I also talk about in my book Sewing Jeans, is at least I still find it tricky to get the inner part of the waistband as nicely folded, because usually what you do is that you attach the outer waistband to the garment, and then you fold it over, and then on the inside you need to fold in the seam allowance and then top stitch or stitch in the ditch, which means that you stitch in the outer seam allowance to attach the waistband, and it's going to look really nice on the outside. And you don't need to be hard on yourself. You can't get it to look nice on the inside, but if you're really keen to do that, what I do is I'm holding it up now if you watch the video version, but I stitch a straight line on the inner waistband where the seam allowance is. So in this case it's 1 centimeters. So I stitch this, and I call this like a folding stitch. So I have this straight stitch, and then I press it along that straight stitch. So I get this really nice sharp fold that is very, you can of course do this without sewing first, but it's much easier to gauge if you have like a straight line, and doing that just creates a really neat fold. So then gives you more control. So that's a tip that I highly recommend if you are like me and struggling, because it's difficult to sew a waistband with zippers. Yeah, totally. But I will say that sewing a waistband that looks as nice on the inside as the outside is harder, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's such a good tip, because you don't see the inside of the waistband when you are sewing, so it's so easily to miss, or that the seam is not catching all the layers. So that's a really good tip, to actually sew a fold seam first and pre-press. Like here, you can't skip pressing. It's gonna look rubbish if you don't press it before. So you have to do it. But here there are also different ways of making it. I mean, you don't have to fold it if you don't want to. I've seen it on like chinos and more office wear trousers. Then you can actually have you can leave it unfolded and just overcast the seam. Doesn't look so nice. But then you can have What I'm called Hong Kong seam when you
so when I'm holding up another pair where it's just showing a beautiful way of ex Malena says, of eliminating this horrible headache to get it inside, is that you, as you Malena say, you do not fold in the seam allowance. Here instead they've used really beautiful bias tape on the inside of the waistband, so you can use that. You can use contrasting bias tape or something that's matching. In this case it's just black on black. But that's so easy, and it actually looks fancier, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's a really great trick. Yeah, exactly. But it's actually cheating in a sense.
Yeah, and this is also if you are really sensitive in. I mean, this way you don't get that much bulk also in the waistband, because all the seam allowance are not folded in one direction in one place, so you spread them out a little bit, and that could also help, like if you are very sensitive to things digging into your body. It could also be a little bit of a comfort thing to actually not fold it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great tip, and I'm promised myself to start doing that more when I'm doing dress pants, because it is a headache. With jeans, it's more difficult to get that nice, but I think you could use it that as well. And when I'm then joining the waistband or stitching it together on the inside, there are basically two methods. I think most dress pants, I think it's stitched in the ditch, and when we say stitch in the ditch, is that you sew from the right side, but you stitch inside that ditch or the seam allowance. So that's how you hide. So you don't actually see any top stitching on the waistband. You just it's just stitched in this groove basically on the front there. So that's a really good way, and very helpful if you find top stitching difficult. If you're using the exact same color on your thread as your garment fabric, it's not going to be visible. So that's what the most beginner friendly method in my opinion.
Yeah, and but if you don't fold up the seam allowance, you there is no way you can't catch it. You always can sew through it as well. So it's a little bit more bulletproof in that sense as well.
Yeah, that's probably our prescription. If you're scared of sewing waistband, do this, as Malena said. Don't fold in the seam allowance. Perhaps cover it either with overcasting or a beautiful bias tape, and then you stitch it in the ditch with matching thread. You're going to have it's going to look like super high end, and it's also the easiest way. What a win-win.
Absolutely. Just don't use a thick fabric for the bias tape. Obviously, like don't use like your shell fabric, your main fabric, because it will create way too much bulk. So either use some thinner fabric if you want to cut it yourself, or some you can buy this, of course, bias tape in store. So yeah, don't use a thick fabric.
Yeah. Good point. And I love this. I'm just looking at it, and actually I'm looking at the seams now, and I can see it's not even on this nice pair of ready-to-wear pants, but it doesn't really matter because it's black on black on black. So great tip. But if you do, for instance, if you're sewing jeans, you can't get around it. And also using contrasting thread, of course. You can save some headache if you're sewing denim, is to actually use navy thread in the bobbin, because if you stitch uneven, it won't be visible. So you can just use yellow top stitching thread on the front, and then no one is gonna be like critical about that, because it doesn't, you do. So I think sometimes we make it too hard on ourselves. I actually do this a lot. When I do like sewing content around jeans, of course I use contrasting thread so everyone can see it. But normally, from just sewing jeans for myself, I oftentimes actually use matching blue thread in the bobbin. So you don't just have to get the top stitching right on the front, which I think is a really helpful tip.
And I have seen if they are like really stretchy trousers, like stretchy fabric, that they have used not a straight seam, but they have used the chain stitch on the cover lock instead.
Yeah,
so then
exactly.
you get the chain stitch on the back side, and then that seam will become a little bit more stretchier. So that's a good tip if you have a stretchy fabric, and otherwise that straight seam might actually start to it's not going to stretch as much as the fabric.
That's a very good point. I mean, some woven stretchy fabric are incredibly stretchy. So yeah, you're going to have some problems there for sure. The only problem sometimes with the cover stitch machine is that it just doesn't always handle thick layers. So I think it's a good method if you're having maybe not too many thick layers of fabric. Then that chain stitch is a great addition. But unfortunately, a lot of domestic cover stitch machine, they kind of will get a little bit cranky when you're trying to top stitch over a denim waistband, unfortunately, even though it's a great feature, and I would love to have a cover stitch machine that was able to do that, but mine unfortunately doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared this before. I think it was in the episode of sewing jeans. I mean, I sewed with industrial machines, and my jeans still got stuck in the machine overnight when I tried to. I think I was sewing a bar tack on top of the loop belt loops, because there are so many layers then. So yeah, it can happen even to industrial machines.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's comforting to know. I think to all of us that are, was like watching, those industrial, think, oh, that's going to solve all our problems. But sometimes it won't. It is tricky. It is tricky. What I also do, if I'm regardless if I'm using the stitch and the ditch method or the top stitching method, what I'm going to do for the denim is that I always base the waistband on the inside, and I do that quite meticulously. I make sure that it's that it folds aligned with the seam that you sewn on the first, and just base it really, really tight, because then you will prevent the shifting. Because sometimes when you're sewing the waistband and you don't control the fabric, you will have the upper layer shifting a little bit forward all the time. So then you get those like slightly vertical drag lines on your waistband, and you want your waistband to lie flat. Sometimes it can be fixed with a little bit of pressing, but my method is, I highly recommend that you either baste it or use some other type of like stick method, like using what's called Wonder tape, which is a washable double-sided tape, something that will keep the under layer or the inside of the waistband in place. Because pinning is going to be so cumbersome. I think it's better to use thread, in my opinion. Yeah,
in these cases, take your time and baste it before that's a really good tip.
And so that's probably then of course I think one struggle at the front of the waistband is where you put the buttons, is that it's a little bit difficult to get that sharp corner. And actually sewn a nice detail on these unique pants that I've used a lot of demonstration is that they have extended the outer waistband piece towards the inside, so it's actually folded over, and then that waistband ends about 4 or 5 centimeters on the back.
Okay,
and I thought that was a really clever way. Yeah, clever way of doing it. Yeah. So if you're watching the video version, you can see that there is no actual seam at the button, the folded button. It's just folded over and extended in the back, and then it's joined 5 centimeters in or 2 inches on the. And I thought that's something I'm definitely also gonna try to do myself, and it could be a tip if you're having problems of getting that nice sharp corner.
That's interesting detail. I really like that, because also then it creates less bulk at the front, because there you don't need it, you don't want it, because it's on top of when you button it. It's no need for it. That's a good clever idea. Yeah, right. That's again, if we say, look at ready to wear. I mean, they know a few things. Sometimes I think it can be. Sometimes I think it's easy to get a little bit snobbish, because us as home sewists, we feel we take a lot of care and consideration into how we produce things, but we have also a lot of stuff to learn from ready to wear, because they have to do methods that are solid and really good. And especially, as you say, Malena, if you have too much bulk at the front as well, it's going to be difficult when you're trying to sew buttonholes, for instance, if you have too many fabric layers. So doing that wraparound method, I think it's when I start next time I'm doing a pair of dress pants, I'm going to do that wraparound method for sure, and I will report back. I thought it was really, really clever. As you say, I'm very nerd about this stuff. I love looking inside. No, but 100% with you. Like, it's those small details. I mean, that's really what I'm passionate about within the garment industry. It's not like I don't really care what's the new trend color this is. I genuinely don't care. But it is those kind of details, like, ooh, let me see. Can I cut it apart? Can I see how it's made on the inside? Like, it's those small things that can have quite a big difference, actually, in how it's made, how it's done. If it's easier on the working process, and if it's better when you wear it, like those kind of small things that I'm so into them.
Yeah. Welcome to the nerdiest sewing podcast ever. Yeah, but we're definitely two of the same minds there. I hope you enjoy when we really dive deep into this stuff. And again, I highly recommend you check out the video version here, because we do show a lot of stuff. And if you, we also, of course, as I said, we'll post it on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, as well. A lot of the details we're talking about here. I think now, I guess we could, buttonholes, we could say a lot of stuff, but I think we're going to skip that because we'd already talked an hour. But we're definitely going to mention a little bit about the hemming as well. Right. So hemming, when you're doing dress pants, my preferred method is to use invisible hemming, which means that the stitch isn't visible on the outside rather than top stitching. Do you agree with me, Malena, or of the look here?
Yeah, it gives such an easy, clean look. And here, if you can do the fold up, you don't have to overcast it. You can do that same bias tape around the fold up as well if you want to have a really nice detail, or fold it in so you don't actually see the overlocked or overcast edged. So you can really do those small details here as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's what I really think about love sewing, that those tiny details that take a little bit extra time, but just add that special feeling. I think that's taking that kind of care. It's definitely very rewarding. I totally agree with you. And you can either, of course, use invisible hemming with your hand, like hand stitching. Any sewing book will have instruction for that. It's very easy to understand. You just have to be careful that you just have to pick like the tiniest thread on the inside, because otherwise you will get like small visible thread bumps on the outside. Because I find for me that when I do it by hand, it's not as durable. It tends to unravel eventually, either by washing or wearing. So I actually oftentimes use my sewing machine, the blind stitch here again. I have lots of tutorials on this as well on my blog, and it's very easy to figure out if you haven't done it before. Again, the trick is to just get that the needle catches the tiniest thread. And also, speaking of pressing, I saw a really good tip here, which I haven't thought about before. I think it was also in the Palmer Pletch books about fitting and sewing pants, is that when you fold up and press, that you should press just the folded edge, because if your iron start to hit over, as maybe you covered it with bias tape or you have serged edges on the inside, there's also again a slight risk that will kind of shine through on the outside, because you press that uneven surface and you're going to have some visible marks of it. Yeah. So it does totally make sense, but it was such a game changer. Like, don't put the iron on the entire fold. Just it just needs to be at the fold, because you don't need to press the rest. You can of course do some pressing after you stitch it, but I thought it was a really helpful little tip that I hadn't really considered before.
No, me neither. I was like, yeah, well, now when you say it, it's like obviously, but yeah, good thing to mention, yeah. And do a little bit wider hem fold up. Because if the garment shrinks when you wash it or something, you have a little bit of a wiggle room there that you can let the hem out after. I mean, it's going to take 2 or 3 years before you probably get around to do it, if you are like me. But you can do it.
You can do, absolutely. And on dressier pants, you definitely want to have a wider seam allowance. It just look more classy. I think at least 3 centimeters, I would say. Yeah, it looks really nice. Probably I think the one I'm holding here is probably 4 centimeters, which is less than 2 inches, but maybe 1.5 inches, maybe roughly. It just looks so much nicer. But of course, if you're going to top stitch, then also again, I think that's the interesting thing, because if you keep the top stitching closer to the edge, it gives the garment a more casual look. So you will see that maybe on jeans, for instance, and very casual woven pants. But if you put the stitching a little bit more away from the edge, it gives a slightly more refined look. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
it's interesting.
It's fun how so small details can appear so differently.
Yeah. And I also I've seen sometimes on jeans that they have the stitch a bit higher, especially if you're doing like wide leg jeans or flared jeans, it can actually look nicer to top stitch it several centimeters away, like maybe 4 centimeters away from the edge, because it gives a nice look overall. I think it's really nice as well. I think we
small detail
pretty much
that I've seen. I mean, now if we're gonna go nerdy, I think it was on I don't remember now exactly, but I think it was on a dressy pair of pants, and I think it was for a men's trousers, that they probably were intended to really like hit the like be long trousers, but then it's easily you step on them when you walk, like you step and the fabric is gonna be easily torn at the back hem because the shoes are like stepping on them, and they had actually added I think it's called a ripstop tape,
nice
tape or something,
like gross grain.
So like a woven tape, they just added it on the inside on the back of the fold up, so you could see it like if you turned up the trouser, but it wasn't obviously visible from the outside. But that also like just like that small detail made them so much more durable than, because the fabric is not going to be worn out if you have shoes that are like stepping on them or like rubbing them.
Yeah.
So just those small details, like always. If you go to a fancy store or something, like always check how they do it on the inside, because it's just those small details that could be really, really nice thing. And I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do when you sew it. It's just one extra moment, or extra step. But yeah, I thought it was a really clever way of doing it.
Yeah, that's really, really clever. And when you say it, I've known that I've seen it too. And again, that's the kind of effort and extra care that you can do when you're sewing stuff yourself, and also adds durability to the garment. And it's a very, very good idea. And also, I think at least for dressier pants, for men at least, I think the rule of thumb, I guess it depends on the style, is that the hem should hit the floor if you're standing without your shoes. So you definitely you want that length to slightly go down to the sole. So that's why it's very easy to, as you say, Malena, to get that wear and tear, because you don't want the dress pants to be too cropped. They should definitely fall towards the sole. So you can guess, I mean, if the pants ride down a little bit in the back, you're definitely going to have that, as you say, the wear and tear of the sole. Yeah, and I can also recommend really to look at like functional garments, because they have usually these like higher brand, like more expensive. They usually have like these small clever things for trousers, like, or garments in general, like small details, but it just have the functions built into them, and it's just really, it's so interesting to see how they do it, and you get really inspired of you get many ideas from them. Yeah, such many great ideas. I love it too, and it's a nice way of like doing window shopping. It's like learning. You do shopping, you don't buy anything, but you're a student of the finer garments. And if you have any type of high-end physical store in nearby, I totally agree with you. I've learned so much about sewing, just as you say, Malena, just by looking inside of really, really well-made garments. It's very, very inspirational. And I love adding those details, because I mean, you put so much effort into making your own garments as well, so why skimp on those little details? I mean, that's why it gives more character and makes it more special. You know, honestly, I think doing this series now, actually I'm starting to do a pair of jeans that I think will be done in today or tomorrow, but I just feel really inspired now to actually do dress pants, more dress pants, because especially when we talk about all this stuff right now with the bias tape on the inside and adding that gross grain tape at the bottom of the hem, you know, using nice contrasting lining for the pockets and stuff like that we talked about. You know, stay tuned, listeners. Maybe Johanna will be able to sew another pair of pants into 2024. Who knows? And we will see if we can get Malena's mojo going as well. We'll see.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, I want to, definitely, but realistic expectations, no, probably not gonna happen. But just one more, when we talk about this is quite common on menswear, on dressier trousers, that the back crotch seam, they actually have quite wide seam allowance at the center back seam. At the waist. Down below, then it can be like 1 centimeter regular seam allowance. But in the center back waist, then it could be like 3-4 centimeter, like almost 1.5 inch or something.
Wow.
And they also have that then in the waistband. And that's because it's so much easier than if you need to increase the waistband a little bit, you have a little bit of extra centimeters there, so you could easily take them out. So that's why dressier trousers for men's are sewn a little bit different in the back seam. It's because you have that wiggle room when you take your trousers to your tailor to get them, fitted properly, as we all do. But sorry, I lost my earphone there.
Yeah, but we are our own tailors, so that's a really good tip, because obviously sometimes one thing you can be pretty sure of, that your body won't stay the same your entire adult life. We don't stop growing or shrinking depending, but we are definitely you're going to go through a lot of body changes as during the year. So I think building in that kind of flexibility into your garments is very, very helpful. That's a great tip. And when you say it, I actually noticed it, but I didn't connect the dots. But yeah, great tip.
Yeah, those
few
then you
extra
just have centimeters over the years can give a little bit extra room, literally.
Yeah, so and also again, it gives more longevity to your garments. A lot of the stuff we talked about now, taking the care of really doing great like back end work, so to speak, when you're constructing the garment, is you can add more, like doing, like picking the right zippers, really reinforce areas that are under high stress, and as you say, build in some flexibility when it comes to adding or subtracting width for your pants. Really, really helpful tips, I think. That was a
you get so many ideas. I can see how your brain is like working now. I
want to make so many tutorials about this stuff as well. So I'm definitely stay tuned. If I do more dress pants this year, I'm definitely gonna do more tutorials as well on some of the stuff I haven't done yet. So we managed to talk 70 minutes now, Malena. On pants, but didn't even mention buttons and buttonholes. But buttons and buttonholes. We could do an entire episode just on that topic, I think, honestly, because it's a topic. Just like zippers.
Maybe we can save it for the future with buttons hole for like shirts as well and everything. Like you don't only have them on trousers, so there's probably a lot to talk about there as well.
Yeah, maybe it's going to be a 3-part as well. This is like, it's a typical, like when they do like super Marvel movies, and they always like three episodes. So we also managed to do 3 episodes just on sewing pants. So
yeah, and we weren't able to cover everything anyway.
Yeah. So we're going to do another universe when we talk about buttons and stuff like that. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Again, go and check our video version of this podcast on Stitching Tales Pod on YouTube, and of course our Instagram account Stitching Tales Pod. We're going to show a lot of pictures, and also hopefully the done jeans that I've talked about in this episode, because I only have the waistband and the hemming left. So yeah, I'm getting close.
That's a good
Maybe today.
Deadline.
Yeah, definitely. So it's nice to share some stuff so you can actually see that we are actually sewing stuff sometimes too.
Like when you say we, you mean you.
Yeah, but we're basically as one person. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.